Well, it is just a real delight to be back here in Rishikesh area. We're just upstream from the Ganges, a tributary, at Sattva Retreat Center here with Anand Mehrotra, the founder. And Anand, as soon as I just walked in here, I just felt like I was home again. It's just such a beautiful presence. And over the years, we've been having interviews with you. And one of the things I just really appreciate that you're able to really bridge the deeper essence, the ancient roots of yoga into the modern times. And just even the property here. I mean, tell us just briefly, like this property, you were saying on the drive over here that rishis have been coming on this trail here to Rishikesh for years.
Yes, I mean, this little trail here is the ancient route, the pilgrimage route. So when the yogis, when we call Rishikesh the yoga capital of the world, it's really not the Rishikesh town. We are referring to this lower Shivalik Himalayas for obvious reasons, because as you can see around, it's a very optimal place to be. It's very green and lush, and so the yogis used to reside in these mountains, and then they would go up for pilgrimage up to the higher Himalayas, which they, Badrinath and Kedarnath and all these great Valley of Flowers and all these powerful vortexes are. But they're not very, this is not where they lived for a long time. They would go there, visit and come back. And so the route was this. So all these pilgrims would go through this route. So if, Adiguru Shankaracharya, when he went because he's the one who established Kedarnath and Badrinath into very well-known places, he must have walked also through this this road, going up to the great pilgrimage. So you can, when you tune in, you can still sense the vibration of all the yogis who devoted their life to self-realization.
Yeah, and I think it's quite beautiful. You were talking about how those subtle vibrations are here, and yet yoga has adapted. And you were born in Rishikesh. I remember you in another interview you were saying, sitting on the lap of your guru, playing with his beard. Yes. And so from an early age, you've been exposed to the subtle aspect of yoga and the deeper essence of yoga. I mean, you even lived in a cave for a few months, and so you've been really immersed in this deep ancient wisdom. And at the same time, what I really appreciate about you're able to do is keep in touch with that deeper essence and then adapt it to the modern context. And so tell us a little bit about how you see yoga being alive in this modern time and how it's been adapting.
You see, I mean, that's one of the most phenomenal things about yoga is if you look at this is body of knowledge, which is, I mean, if in linear time, at least 10,000 years, And it has still is relevant. It's because it has been able to adapt, and that's one of the hallmarks of wisdom. Is adaptability. I mean, if what is not able to adapt, nature does away with it. It does away with species which is not able to adapt and serve the evolutionary course of existence. Whether it's dinosaurs or if humanity doesn't course correct, then nature does away with humanity. So I think yoga is it's an incredibly, without any central figure of controlling organization. It is a people's knowledge. You see, there is not a singular authority, not a messiah in this tradition which control this knowledge. So it has been adapted by gurus and masters and teachers, people experimenting with it, innovating, and really making it relevant for the times they were in. And that's why religions have come and gone, and then what we see right now globally, that there is more and more people will describe themselves as not being religious and more spiritual. And if anybody who is describing themselves as being spiritual, they will have something to do with yoga.
Yes.
I mean, it is because yoga is the spiritual heritage of humanity. You see, it does not belong to any particular one person or one messiah or one tradition. This is the spiritual heritage of humanity, and that's why it is still relevant. It is able to adapt itself. We call it yoga now. You see, we have called it different things at different times. But this is the collective of humanity, this collective awakened consciousness is what yoga is.
Yes, the awakened consciousness, and then yoga in the deeper essence leads to a process of self-realization. And so I really want to talk about that, about the self-realization and some of the personal transformations that happen in that process, and how you are working with this in this modern time.
Yeah, you see, when that's the original assumption, right? The original assumption is self. I am, and then there is everything else. And when you speak to I am, what we find that we are not able to locate the I. If I say I am Anand, or I am Indian, or I am American, the I, where is this I? Is this in my toes? Is it in my brain? Is it in my heart? Is it in my skin? Where is this I? Is it just in the memory? What happens when the memory is wiped out? So this I, what we find is actually we are not able to locate. So what it means is that this I is unobserved. It has not been observed. What has been observed is the content of the I. So yoga is about, if the I, which is the fundamental base of all experience, because the experiencer is the experience, if this I is not being observed, then life remains in ignorance. For the unobserved I cannot live an awakened life. It's like a rose. You cannot know something just by thinking about it. You cannot grow rose by thinking about rose or reading about rose. You have to observe the rose for you to begin to realize rose. The same thing is in the yoga, is the art. You begin with observing yourself. As you begin to observe yourself, different aspects of self start to reveal to you. You start to learn great knowledge of self, which cannot be spoon-fed to you. It cannot be, that's why this technology of yoga, doing the kriyas, pranayamas, asanas, meditation, using the sound, all of these are values, techniques to refine your understanding of self. Self as body, self as energy, self as thought, self as silence, self as individuality, and ultimately self as the cosmos. For all these are all layers of self.
And what I love about this is an ancient science. Because as you're saying, you can't think about it, you can't think about a rose and smell it, but rather you can do these different techniques and then start to have one's own experience.
Exactly.
Can you please speak to that? What you've been seeing with the people you've been working with in your own experience?
You see, when you experience something for yourself, it comes within the realm of your own authority. Then you are not dependent on somebody else's authority. And as long as you don't reach your own realization on something, you are always insecure. You're always insecure. And as long as you're insecure, you are ready to fight. You're violent somewhere because you're afraid. You're afraid in that knowledge. You're not secure in that knowledge. So then it creates complex belief systems, and that's the domain of religion where conflicts have happened. So much violence has come up in the name of God. It's because the individual is not having the experience of God. It only has an idea of even the word God, just an idea of God. And because the idea is there which is not realized, there is insecurity. And that creates conflict. Conflict based on identities and ideas about what God is and what is the ways to reach God. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. So in the yogic teaching, the fundamental thing is to realize, not just to be with the belief, but to realize, to bring it to your own experience. And when you bring it to your own experience, what arises there is security. Not a security which comes through pursuit. A security meaning you start to be at home with that knowledge. And that knowledge starts to shift. You start to fundamentally change, because it's not just a thought. It's not just a memory, it's a visceral experience. So when you dip in water, you get wet. If you just think about water, doesn't mean anything. You believe in water, you don't believe in water. But when you dip in water, you're going to get wet.
And so what are some of the personal transformations you see with people that you've been working with who start to dip into the water, start to dip into this self?
I mean, fundamentally, one of the first things that starts to happen is experience of meaning of life. Because you see, life, if you think about it, it's kind of meaningless. If you think about it. Because what we see as humanity is a crisis of meaning. You see, as collective species, what we experience is a crisis of meaning, and then we try to come up with meaning of life through our egoic agendas, and then we project that meaning into ourselves and onto our society, and then we chase that meaning. But what we are experiencing is crisis of meaning. We find meaninglessness. So we get up, we don't know who we are. You see, we feel worthless. That's a crisis. So what I see is fundamentally what starts to happen is an experience of meaning. A kind of the individual start to be more at ease with themselves. That's the first thing that starts to happen, that you start to become much more at home with yourself. And I think it's a fundamental value. We cannot impact change. We cannot live a life worth living if we are not at home with ourselves. So what I see, the first fundamental change which starts to happen is people start to be more at home with themselves. They don't feel the urge to escape themselves. Because the urge to escape oneself is when you come home and you feel crisis of meaning. For you are not enough. Just what is here is just not enough, ever. So you need to constantly escape yourself to find meaning. See, who am I? What am I doing here? Am I ever enough? And it's just always the answer in the mind is not. You're never enough. You see, it's never enough.
Right, and so people can start experiencing ease, feeling at home in themselves, and then as that blossoms further, when people go deeper into these practices, what are some of
the greater sense of self-realization starts, or you start to have the greater compassion, greater kindness. Your creativity starts to boost. You see, what you start to see is vairagyam starts to occur in you, where you start to get non-identified. Detachment starts to happen. You're no more identified to limited positionalities. Because if you're identified to limited positionalities, that's violent. Your identification to limited positionalities start to transcend. You start to let go of that. Your inner creativity starts to increase because you realize it's not you creating, you see. Nature creates. And you learn to get out of the way. Because look, I mean, just for a moment, we have to pause. We have become so reductionist in our approach to life. I mean, we say, oh, this atom. What we don't realize, what we call atom is we have given it a name, atom. Atom doesn't think I am atom. We have called it an atom, and we think, oh, atom. But we don't realize atom is a human word. It's not an atomic word. So it's a word of, but so we have to, for a moment, pause and realize, look around and see the phenomenal creativity going on. Doesn't matter from where it's coming, who's creating, but we can see and observe that there is phenomenal creativity. Because consciousness cannot not create. Consciousness by its essence, because subtler than subtlest things.
I love this. So as a person goes deeper into these practice, it's not a selfish thing, oh, I'm going to escape from the world. It's rather, I'm really tapping into, or how would you describe it?
Yes, you see, the I becomes less and less. The I starts to expand. And this, you start to see, it's just really nature flowing through you. You start to be because you and I are and everybody listening and not listening is as extraordinary piece of existence as a mountain or a galaxy or a distant star. You see, what makes us believe that we are not an extraordinary piece is our memory, is our conditioning. When this starts, you start to become free of this fabricated hallucination, of this mirage of sense of self, or who am I, because it's a mirage. It doesn't really, it's an inadequate sense of who we are. This sense of I starts to change.
Okay.
And what you start to allow is this extraordinary intelligence. You start to stop suppressing it. You start to give existence permission to play herself out fully through you.
Yes, and so describe what that feels like when a person's living from that place.
I mean, it feels ecstatic. It feels deeply humbling. It feels fearless, and it feels incredibly kind, and it feels hilarious also, at times, because you see the joke of it, and at the same time, it includes the awareness of incredible pain of humanity. It includes the awareness of pain of separation, and that gives birth to deep compassion, and it gives you rise to the radical awareness of the impermanence of life. So you don't really hold on to anything, you see. It's difficult to just limit it in few words, because the more you go into that state, the harder you find to put it into some words,
Right. And then seva and service and compassion and expressions are natural.
Absolutely. Your intuition starts to increase. Your access to non-local knowledge, what we call intuition, is access to non-local knowledge. Non-local knowledge being that your sense of intelligence is not limited by what you have experienced in your memory. So your sense of self is not based on that. So you're expanding. Your knowledge starts to expand. Your sense of heart starts to open. You live more and more heart-filled life. You feel more and more alive, you see. And nobody can contain you in any container anymore.
Right. And so as more and more people are going deeper into the different branches of yoga, we can start to have this awakening. And so just in the potential of humanity manifesting from this, but just to wrap up here, for people who are listening to this, and some people may be new to yoga, some people may be deeper into what is the words of encouragement you have about this awakening process?
I think what's important to realize is that nobody's new to yoga. You see, we might think we are new to yoga, but we are not new to yoga, because yoga really means love. And love is what we have been seeking for eternity. So we are not new to seeking love. That's what we have been doing here. That's all that is happening is love. And that's what we are looking for. So this is as long as we are. This is as old as we are. It doesn't matter if you have ever been to a yoga class. That's just one expression or one interpretation of this ancient body of knowledge. You see, so we are all walking each other to self-realization. You know, that's all we have been always moving towards. The purpose of life is that. So I think wherever you are is the beginning. Doesn't matter where you are. Wherever you are is the point value to infinity. So for me, infinity has two values. One is the point value, and one is the value which has no boundaries to it. For infinity is made up of points. Infinite points. So wherever you are is the point value to infinity. That's the doorway. This moment is the doorway to infinity. You are the doorway to infinity. So you are the point of the total existence. And when you really realize that for a moment and just be with that and just watch what happens, that you are the point through which infinity occurs. Infinity collapses at this point. And through this point, infinity is experienced. Just be with that and begin there. For this is where the beginning is, and this is where the end is. Beautiful. You see? So, thank you.
Well, Anand, thank you so much. I just want to encourage people to look at Sattva Retreat Center. If you ever have a chance to come here, the presence alone will be transformational. Thank you. Namaste.
Om Tare Tu Re So